Good evening, everybody. This is Cinnamon Noir.
And this is the Ramen Shaman.
Welcome back to Fez. So today we're going to be doing a little bit more cube hunting. This is probably the least eventful of all the videos in terms of major things happening, because we're not going to see any, new towns or anything like that. And it's only in the last video that we're going to see the actual ending. But there's some very interesting areas we're going to visit in this one. Some of my favorites, actually. And aesthetically, the ones in this video are very unusual. So, if you thought of the last two as being like mechanics-focused videos, this one may be more visuals-focused. So we start in the ivory tower section. Ah, yes. So here I'm heading back up to a place where I've already gotten a chest. The reason is because I left a yellow cube behind. And I think... no, not yet. There's another reason I'm here, which is to get that treasure chest. You notice how it seems inaccessible?
It does. It seems to be sort of at a diagonal from you. That seems to be how they do, how they make things hard to reach.
It's how they make it far away. That alone, just shifting, is not enough to get this. You actually need a hint, because there are some invisible platforms here. As I find out, to my regret. No, we actually already have the clue that I need for this. I just need to figure out where it is. What makes this difficult is that you need to jump on an invisible platform, shift, and then jump on another one. The other platform that's invisible is pretty much inaccessible from your original vantage point. Unfortunately, I'm a dummy, and I have not figured out yet that I have the clue I need. And here's me doing something that's completely useless. I don't know why I'm doing this. Just a minute. Here we go. Heading to some lower doors. You know, it occurs to me, I edited out the end of this video. I could have edited out the beginning, too.
Yeah, probably.
Hindsight.
Oh well.
Anywho, we're just looking at the map here. We're going to head to some areas that we have not explored yet.
This game is kind of a slow burn anyway. So
yeah, I know. And one of the major ones we're going to here, which I just looked at, starts at the lighthouse. I don't know if you remember, but the lighthouse had a locked door inside, which you can get to with a regular key. And we have plenty of keys saved up, so I think it's about time we paid it a visit.
Reasonable.
It's just over here. Oh, no, sorry, that's the bell tower. Yeah, I do not think I showed the bell tower solution on screen. I might have. But, interestingly enough, I think the bell tower is still there in the background, even when you've gotten rid of it in the actual area. Like, they don't change the way it looks. I think these little screens you see in the background are fixed. They don't change even when you change something inside the level. It's not a big problem in most of Fez, because usually you don't change the way the area looks. There we go. Heading to the lighthouse. By Virginia Woolf. So here we go. Starting in the little lighthouse keeper's room. I mean, normally there'd be like a whole house attached to it, because lighthouse keepers have to live there, but apparently this one's pretty bare bones. They didn't have the budget for that. No one lives here anyway, so it doesn't matter. So this is kind of an interesting little section. All of these little areas rotate. And you can, in fact, get caught out if you're trying to move between them and fall. But if you're willing to be patient, you can go pretty easily. You can also just jump up. That allows you to traverse most of it in a single bound. It's important to remember not to jump when this thing is moving, because it'll mix you up. There actually is also a hidden chest in here that I get a bit later. Also using invisible platforms. Fez seems to really love those invisible platforms. Anyway, now we are on top of the lighthouse, and as we can see, there's a little floating island in here, which leads to a whole new area. With a very unusual mechanic that starts right here. So there's a hole in the middle of this little rotating room. And you have to keep rotating around to get to this open doorway, which we'll use to turn it 180 degrees.
Oh, that's really clever, because... I don't think
Yes?
I don't think I've seen a puzzle here where you actually rotate a piece of scenery like that.
Right.
In this game, at least.
This is the first point in this game where it's going beyond like simple spatial stuff to the point of having to know what something looks like and how that affects, you know, what it is. So I mess around a little bit here. One thing that's annoying is if you go down on the side of that room, what looks like the side of the room on the ivy, you'll find when you rotate it's actually the tower. So when you thought you were there, you actually are in a completely different building. What you need to do is actually quite simple. If you just stay in this little area, then you can move it around. You basically just have to go to the top of the tower and then drop onto the level where the brick is. It's fairly simple, but I struggled with it for quite a while the first time I did this. This is the introduction of a mechanic that gets a lot more complicated soon. Oh, I was mistaken. It wasn't the other tower where there's the hidden chest. It's this one. This much taller one. You might have noticed, like I said I think in the last episode, that there are little hints on the side of the room that tell you how much stuff is there, like whether there are still cubes to get, or treasure chests and things like that. New cube. And of course the happy dance that goes with it. He never loses his wonder at that. He's always just as impressed. It's funny, he didn't make that face when the giant magic cube showed up, but when he makes a regular one, he loves it.
Maybe the giant magic cube kind of scared him?
That is entirely possible. It kind of scared me.
I mean...
So...
It would be like, you know, learning the ancient eldritch truth. You wouldn't exactly be happy.
Well, and learning it from a geometrical figure at that. I mean, imagine if you found out God was like a, I don't know, a bundt cake shaped thing. It'd be very awkward. Anyway, welcome to the next area. This is, I like to call it the red brick area. It's basically the aesthetic that we have here. One of those areas that looks very human. Like someone had to build this. And there's a lot of mechanical devices in this area too, which reinforces that impression. Probably more of those kinds of things here than anywhere else, actually. For one thing, you have a lot of these weird rotating platforms, which will switch you around of their own accord. So you have to be kind of careful with these things. Oh yeah, and Squarey here will keep telling you about what pivots are. I don't know why you have the chance to do that after the first time. Like, there are very few things that Squarey will talk about, but Squarey will talk about the pivot forever, if you want.
Oh, God.
I don't get it, anyway.
So, there's worse supporting characters in the world.
Definitely. At least she's quiet most of the time. Or he. I mean, I think of it as a she just because they often are, but who knows, really. Beats the hell out of Fi.
Was Navi's gender ever...
Navi's a girl. Yeah. Navi's definitely female. And so is Tattle from Majora's Mask. You know, because Tail's her brother, and they're like a matched set of twins. That's more clear in that game. Which is weirder, because it's even less necessary. But anyway. Yeah, fairy characters are unusual. They're very popular as sidekicks. I'm not entirely sure why. I think it's because it's reasonable for them to know things that humans don't, because they're magical.
Well, Also, the physical size aspect means they can be unobtrusive
Right.
when they need to be. A lesson that
Right.
is kind of lost on Navi.
They don't dwarf the kids.
Mm-hmm.
Except for Fi, who is considerably taller than you.
But
Just another
light
reason
lives
why
in
she's
your
not good
soul.
at her job.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, but that's the weird thing, is she's much taller than the sword, too.
Well, but...
I thought she was actually supposed to be the sword. I mean, she doesn't just represent the sword or live in it. She is it, right?
I think she is, yeah.
For those of you listening at home, I think Greg just knocked over his mic.
I did. I'll
Details at 11.
probably edit that out, but you know.
Don't. I want that in.
Okay.
In fact, I'm going to lampshade it just so that you can't get rid of it.
Yeah,
they'll
that's...
know,
it,
no matter
it
what
would
you
have
do.
been easier to get rid of in post if we hadn't actively discussed it.
Oh, shoot. Yeah, so this is the danger of those things, especially the small ones. It's very easy to fall off of them because you're distracted from them shifting around. I don't know why I didn't go to the top of the tower for the rest of it, but, you know, whatever. We've got other places to go. This area is one of the biggest in the game, so it's very easy to get lost or forget to go back for things you wanted. Now I remember what I did. This is dumb. I was trying to get to that door, but you can only get to that door by dropping to it from above. Kind of annoying. Wasted some time there. Yeah, it took me a little while to figure this one out. Anyway, yeah, Fi. I think she's just a terrible sidekick, all things considered.
Yeah.
And kind of like Squarey here, she's also very technological. Like, that's the idea of Fi. Like, she's almost like a computer person. Or like whatever the magical equivalent is.
Yeah.
One thing I remember about Fi is she kept talking about how you had a certain percentage chance of doing something.
Which is just... that's never a really... That's always kind of an irritating, verbal... That's always kind of an irritating habit for characters to do in media. Because it always
funny.
raises the question, how the hell did you come up with that figure?
Right, it seems so fake. There's only one other character, actually, that I have ever heard doing that, and that's C-3PO from Star Wars.
And it sounds kind of bullshit even when he does.
Actually, now that I think about it, C-3PO was even less technicky about it, because he did it, like, chances out of a number. Like, he said the chances are 3 million to 1. Whereas Fi says, like, there's a 93% chance. C-3PO actually sounds more down-to-earth. And if you're less down-to-earth than C-3PO, you have serious problems. Anyway, I eventually figured out you do need to get rid of those things to get through this area.
Also,
You can't progress when those things are around. Sorry, what?
Bit of a late rejoinder, but if you're more annoying than C-3PO, you also have serious problems.
Yeah. I didn't think he was that annoying. I thought that was overstated. But then again, I was never really that annoyed by Navi either.
It's definitely... he's definitely not that bad when you actually watch the movies. I think R2 is definitely the more likable of the two.
Yeah, but that's sort of cheap. I mean, R2 doesn't do anything.
True.
It's just a pet.
Yeah.
It's easier to like an animalistic kind of character than it is to like a person. Especially when the person has personality traits that are designed to be idiosyncratic. The weird thing is that C-3PO is kind of like Marvin the paranoid android in that he was built to be finicky and cowardly. And it makes you wonder, why would anyone do that? What's the point?
Good question. I mean, he's not very physically durable, so you can see why he might just from a practical perspective be kind of a coward.
Right. Well, it makes him seem more human. But that's the funny thing, is that only works if you don't think about it. So anyway, here's a little twist on the mechanic we saw earlier. Instead of lining up one of these things with the wall, we need to line them both up with each other.
Interesting. Oh!
That way we can go through the whole thing, if I can get off this ladder. Come on, Gomez, work with me. There we go. And unfortunately, I rotated this in the wrong direction.
Oops.
That's how it goes. I find it interesting that Gomez always trips over himself when he pushes this. It implies that these are really heavy, which I guess they are rotating an entire, like, giant cinder block, so they should be. This is one of the areas I really like in terms of its layout, because you have to treat it as a single vertical section when you're climbing up, but then you see it's all these different areas when you're actually moving around on it. And it's very simple in that design, but it's kind of clever. It does that thing that I've heard Scott Adams refer to as tickling your brain. At least it does for me. Here we have...
That always makes me imagine a very literal image that's kind of unpleasant.
That would be incredibly creepy.
Yes.
Also, oddly enough, you wouldn't feel it, because your brain doesn't have any nerves directly in it.
No,
it's all attached to your brain.
Not. Although the process needed to gain access to your brain would probably hurt quite a fair bit.
Definitely. Well, the poking your brain itself would hurt. Or damage you, I mean. Anyway, here we see a little variation on this moving platform mechanic, which is very tricky to get your brain around.
Actually, if they prodded the parts of your brain that control your sense of touch, you might not feel pain, but you probably feel something really goddamn weird.
Yeah, I imagine so. Anyway, so these platforms, they're really all about timing. If you can get the timing down, you don't even need to worry about rotating. It is crucial that you learn how to be in the middle of one of these to jump and land on it when it goes vertical, like that. This is the tricky one, this part, because these two have kind of an awkward setup, where it's hard to tell when they move. And, you know, this is going to sound kind of weird, but there are two ways to time platforms that are next to each other in a lot of games. One way is to have them be in a movement, like a motion, where the two of them always have the same relationship with each other. You know what I mean? Where it's reliable. The other one is to have them on sort of alternating rhythms, discordant, so that you have to not learn the rhythm of them, but just know how to work on the fly. And that second way is much harder. I've seen it used less often, but I don't know if you remember Karo Blaster. There were a number of moving platforms that worked that way in Karo Blaster.
Yeah.
So it made it more about mechanical mastery than it was about learning patterns. And I find it very interesting how some games go one way and some go the other. It sort of determines whether something is more of a puzzle game or more, how to put it, like twitchy? There's a term for that, but I'm forgetting it. Oh, and here's Squarey accidentally reminding me that this is a pivot again.
Precision-based, maybe?
Yeah. Anyway, this is the end of the line for one of these big areas, which is why there's a big cube on top. And also another door to go in.
Interesting.
What we need is to find the hole in this thing. We need to rotate both of these sections until they line up. You've probably noticed that the one on the bottom rotates the outer, whatever it is. And the, oh sorry, the one on the bottom rotates the one in the middle. The one on top rotates the one on the outside.
Yeah, I can see.
So we need to get in that hole. Oh, third time's the charm.
Or fourth.
We'll see. It was the fourth. Fourth time's the charm.
There we go.
We've invented a new phrase.
Oh, I bet the door at the center, I bet that's actually like its own stationary core or something. Or I wonder if that's the case. Like, they both have to be in the same position, not just relative to each other, but in the right position relative to each other and to the door inside.
I don't think so, actually. I think you could be right. There's no telling now, because we're never coming back here. Anyway, interesting mechanic here. Seen in a lot of games where you have little springs that propel you upward. Not used very often in this game, actually. It's mostly confined to here and I think one other room. There we go. We get our cube. And a warp back, as almost always happens when you get a big platforming cube. We're not going to use that because we have more stuff to explore around here. I don't know why I'm rotating this. I don't need to. I do, however, need to look where I'm looping. I don't know what I was doing here. I think maybe I thought there were 2 openings you could go for. But I'm confusing this with Zelda. It's exactly the kind of thing Zelda would do. And in fact, I think they actually do in the Forest Temple in Ocarina of Time. But Fez is a lot more focused. When you solve a puzzle, it's pretty much the only way it wants to be solved. Oh, I also realized just then that you can look at any room on the map and see whether you've actually gotten everything in it or not, and I have. In fact, this whole area has been cleared out. Might just as well have taken the warp, actually, but you know, hindsight. So I was getting a little confused here, because I was trying to find a way to back this thing up, and I didn't realize that it doesn't go right in either direction if you push. You actually have to pull. But I had pushed these things for so long that I had forgotten that you even could pull them. Basically, when you grip onto it, if you press W, like you're about to move forward, you'll push them. But you can also press S to pull them. And like an S, I completely forgot that. It really is magical seeing someone learn, isn't it? Especially when they're dumb. There we go.
Well, I've been there before.
Haven't we all?
Nah.
Certainly anyone who's played Fez. Anyway, here's a frustrating thing about this platform. That if you're not careful with it, it'll dump you right in the black hole. But unlike the one in the other room, which actually prevents you from making progress, this is more like the typical kind, which just makes it harder to get around.
Yeah.
I haven't tested to see how many rooms these things actually completely ruin for you, so that you have to leave and come back later. But I think it's relatively small. It's an oversight, I believe. I don't think they ever intended for any of these to act that way.
Yeah.
Because if they had, that would be really annoying. They might discourage you from continuing, you know, if you don't want to figure out the way to get past them. But none of them should just prevent you from doing anything.
Yeah, I can see what you mean.
Excuse me. The idea of discouraging the player from doing things you don't want them to do, while still giving them the freedom to do it, very tricky area of game design, I think.
Yeah.
Dark Souls has dealt with that a little bit, hasn't it?
There are certain areas, that'll beat on you if you go there too low level.
Right. And there's some where, like, you have to either grind for a bunch of souls or wait till a certain point in the plot. Something like that.
Yeah. There's one area I can think of. I'm not sure it's... Actually, no, it is mandatory. It does... you have to just straight up buy an item that costs 20,000 souls.
Oh, jeez.
Well, the thing about gating an area behind that many souls is, in some ways, that's also a way to encourage you to come back later, because the later you are in the game, the easier it is to farm that.
Oh, here we go. So there are more pistons around here. They're just a different design. More in keeping with the outside area aesthetic. The ones indoors were all gray.
Yeah.
These... It's hard to say exactly what these do look like. Sorry, what?
Do they shoot you up if you are standing on them when they go up?
Yes. That's the only way you can use them to go up. So this was very unusual. I get the final cube, fall off, die, and then do the victory dance.
I was a little
after
confused.
Respawning.
I thought you were going to use the piston to, like, shoot you up in the air.
Well, yeah, that's what it does. So you climb on top of it, wait, and after a while it'll shoot you, just like that. Here I'm just waiting for it to move me around, because I realized that by jumping around and shifting in midair, I was really doing myself a disservice. Although, in this area, it's kind of necessary. You can either do that, or you can start running along it while it's just about to pop, and then by getting some forward momentum, you can make it propel you there. But that's one where you're not directly underneath the next platform you need to go to. So you do have to be a little careful about doing that. Here's more of the annoying rotating platforms that shift without turning you along with them. Some big, some small. And I like the sound design on these things. It gives them a real sense of weight. Not entirely easy to do, considering that these things look very artificial.
Yeah, I was trying to listen to them.
It's hard to imagine how these things could have been made at all. Oh boy, this section. Being a little daring here, and it does not pay off. For some reason, I remember a section in the final boss level of Super Mario 64 that feels a little like this. Where you're riding a moving platform, and there are a bunch of barriers that you have to jump on top of. And you can jump over them and go on the platforms instead of staying on the one you're on. But it's much trickier that way. I wouldn't recommend it. You cannot run straight across these no matter how good your timing is, so you will have to make sure you jump in the middle of it. Oh, and this section. This is rough. It's interesting. From one direction, it looks like these things are completely chaotic, but in the other, you can see that they're actually all rotating in a sequence. And as long as you don't get caught where they're flipping, which is fairly noticeable, you can just move along them. Yeah, I like this area a lot, too.
Yeah.
All things considered, this is one of the better open areas of the game. Some very interesting platforming ideas being used here. These screws I also like a lot because they remind me of a level from Sonic the Hedgehog.
Oh, yeah! I think I know exactly what you're talking about. Or
Metropolis Zone from Sonic 2.
Yep.
Which also has amazing music. By the way, there's a sort of pro-player, user-friendly tool in here. If you accidentally take these things too far up and then jump off to a lower level, they will rotate down to meet you. They don't rotate all the way down, just long enough that you can barely get to them, which is a little bit interesting. It'd be more realistic if they threaded all the way back down. That's actually what they do in Sonic.
Okay.
Now, all in all, this world seems very amenable to Gomez. It allows itself to be convenient for him. That's always a tricky thing, to make games user-friendly without making them seem artificial. Because they can very easily seem that way. And, you know, I've heard people say about, you know, just bring up Dark Souls again, that one of the things that makes Dark Souls interesting from an aesthetic perspective is that it seems like the world doesn't care about you. It's designed as if it were a real world where you're just one person.
Yeah, there's definitely truth to that.
But to some people that can seem very cold and unfriendly.
Which is kind of the point for Dark Souls.
Well, sorry, I should have said. To some people, feeling cold and unfriendly is unpleasant, and they don't want it.
Yeah.
It's obvious that it's unfriendly. The question is whether you like that or not. Not to imply that people who like that are masochists or anything.
Well, you know, sometimes there's a certain catharsis in sad or bleak or dark things.
I think it's just all about immersion. Players want to be immersed, and you feel more immersed when the game world is realistic. Here is a very clever use of the moving platforms with shifting mechanics. So these are moving platforms that move on these tracks in the sky. When you shift, the tracks themselves also change shape. They're basically three-dimensional. So there are areas where you will need to change the tracks while the thing is moving in order to make sure it gets to the end. Because you can already see actually above there for a second, you could see. There are tracks that are split from certain perspectives. You need to shift until they're joined together. Oh, this is a very interesting room. So right out in the middle of nowhere, and the music is stopped. This is actually the transport to a totally new area, which is new not only mechanically, but also aesthetically, like I said earlier. This little green pipe. Obvious Mario Brothers reference. I remember watching a Let's Play where someone was questioning how you should emerge at the other end of the pipe. Like whether you see it from a gravity perspective, like if you enter it top down, you should leave it with your head down. Then another person was saying no, it's just like you fall straight through it, so you should emerge feet first. What made it even more confusing was these people were talking about Super Paper Mario, where this takes place in the Woe Zone, which is all kinds of chaotic gravity. Sorry if I'm completely bewildering you if you haven't played that game.
I'm sort of wrapping my head around the concept, but
I love Super Paper Mario, so I assume everyone's played it.
do you like it more than base Paper Mario?
What do you mean by base? You mean the original or Thousand Year Door?
Oh,
you mean the older style. I prefer the actual RPG, to be honest, but Super Paper Mario was very imaginative, and I appreciate that, so I kind of got over the mechanical changes. To me, it didn't make a huge difference. What I really enjoyed was the world and the story, which I think is equally good. Super Paper Mario, if anything, was a little less funny, which is interesting, because you'd think with all the weirdness and the bizarre character designs that it would be more silly, but it's actually a lot darker and more straightforward than the Thousand Year Door. Anyway, in all this talk about Paper Mario games, I've forgotten to talk about this area. One of the odder areas in the game, it has a unique aesthetic where everything is in this sort of monochrome green palette, which is very similar to the original Game Boy screen. I think that's what they were going for, was a very lo-fi game aesthetic. And it also takes place in sewers with a bunch of these platforms, so I think overall it's meant to evoke like a Mario kind of idea. But of course this is realistic Mario, where he's literally a plumber, which Nintendo doesn't even believe anymore. Despite the fact that the Mario and Luigi series relies on the fact that he is a plumber for certain areas. For instance, someone actually asks you to engage in plumbing at one point to help them.
That's weird, because you never... Like, and the weird thing is, you've seen him not just as adventuring hero, but like you've seen Luigi as essentially a Ghostbuster.
Well, right, but that's only in one side franchise, and that's only had a couple of games in it.
Even
Luigi has been a fellow adventurer with Mario far more often than he's been a ghost hunter.
I mean, adventurer is both of their primary occupation, but in terms of other jobs they have had, it's adventurer, like NASCAR driver,
race car driver. And that's really cool because there is in fact a famous race car driver in real life whose name is Mario. Mario Andretti. You remember him, right?
I don't think I knew that.
Oh, okay. Actually, a ton of racing car drivers, famous ones, have been Italian, because Italy is known for its car driving scene. And for famous car manufacturers like Fiat and things like that. What was one of them I was trying to think of just the other day? Oh, I can't remember. Anyway, it was a famous race car driver who actually started a luxury car company. He had to because during the Great Depression he lost his money. He started a business. Anyway, that little cut you see right there was me cutting out a lot of solving this puzzle because it's very difficult. Yeah, essentially what you're doing here is you have to drain the place until this platform falls onto the little bridge below it, and then you have to use this to move the platform around. You can't do it while it's floating, obviously, because you won't be able to move it. But once you do that, you can get it into the right position. But what makes this tricky is you have to know what's going to be the right position after rotating. And then you have to make sure that it's in the right position to be there while the fluid is still low. And obviously that's a completely different position than the one it'll end up in. Not the easiest thing in the world to do. Anyway, that's the end of this video for now. Tune in next time when we will finish this game.
Yay!
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.